Vapidity, Season 1, Episode 6. Episode 6, Time is Good, Mann. Written wholly by Brian Fredworm McGregor. Now, Erica Good owned a clock store and watch repair department on the corner of a long side street. This store had been there for the best part of 60 years, of which Erica had been the boss there, all of them. And whilst this was a long, enduring career with ups and downs, she had no intention of retiring anytime soon. So even with the late long nights drawing in now that it's November, Erica had considered closing the shop more so over the coming winter months, where business, such as it was, would drop even more sharply. Now Erica, well, she was a self-confessed workaholic as such, being up at dawn and only at rest around midnight or thereabouts, even on the weekends, as she lived to work. Erica led a busy life, and although now her store was a much quieter store these days, she was never interested in money as such at any point. However, she did confess a desire to leave her only great-grandson the business, some money, or indeed a combination somewhat of both. Now Erica's great-grandson Benji, whilst quite young, still understood the premise of time and often tried to stump Erica with tricky or trick questions, as he had quite a great little mind. The last question Benji asked was a beauty, and strangely enough he was coming into the store on his way home after school today with more questions. Well, just one meaningful puzzler, Erica hoped. The watchmaker Erica was taking a delivery today of parts, watches, and an odd clock or so from another dealer. Now this, well, it didn't happen too often, as business was slow, or rather almost, how she put it herself, non-existent. An hour or two later, Erica's great-grandson Benji came to the store door, then waved through the glass, at which point a delivery worker made an appearance too, with a pallet of merchandise on rollers for Erica. Now, at this point, Benji held the door open, then wandered in behind the delivery worker, who had entered the shop just before himself. Once the delivery worker left, Benji helped his great-grandma empty the pallet onto the desk, which was prepared to receive each of the delivered items. Benji just being Benji, he then starts taking everything into the back room next to the restroom. However, Erica spots a rather nice timepiece, which, although she ordered this, it is now that this really catches her eye as the square glass front glints. However, this clock for some reason was wonky, like it had been dropped, as it was acting all funny, as Erica noted at the time. She turns it over to look at the mechanism and sees a warning information sticker which reads, "Do not drop, to prevent unpredictable results." She then reads the front face, which has a logo and a name which she has never heard of. It reads Tempore, the time catcher, a design that brings back those golden years. Erica now decides to replace her other clock in the store with this one, and so she places this odd clock on a rather rusty, wobbly nail, whilst removing the other timepiece as so to watch this new one malfunction, which would help her gauge its problems. Erica nudges this clock to the side, levelling it up before then smiling radiantly, although confesses, "Let's see just how far it goes, and then and only then will I be able to estimate the repair cost too. Well, at least somewhat better." Now at this point, Benji returns back to the store floor, where he and his great-grandma chat away about life at which point they break into a great discussion about Benji being big, as he put it himself. Benji tells his great-grandmother rather sweetly that he wishes he was younger again, to which Erica broadly smiles, then whilst blushing somewhat adds, "Don't we all?" rather jokingly, which Benji smiles to. At this point Benji pauses for a few moments, then asks, "See time, is time kind, great-grandma?" Erica now pauses for a moment herself, then says quite clearly, "Well, time is both kind and cruel, Benji. It is kind in that time provides opportunity to become wise, but also cruel in that there can be increasingly less time to become wiser." As it starts to get dark now, and closing time isn't far away anyway, Benji starts to make his way home now, before it becomes pitch black outside. So at this point Benji says his final fond farewells, and then Erica closes the shop, locking up the door fully, just as Benji leaves, waving and blowing kisses through the glass, homewards bound. Erica now sits behind the cash desk with some nice tea and biscuits, at which point she humphs forward in her seat, then rests her chin on her pink cardigan sleeve and slowly but ever so slowly drifts off, as it has been a busy day, albeit through enterprise and not paying customers as such. However, then after a few minutes, Erica is out cold, as in cold, that of being fully and wholly asleep, with a little snoring going on somewhere in there. It grows much darker now as time passes quickly, at which point rather suddenly the timepiece, put up earlier as a replacement of sorts on the wall, falls loose somewhat to the side, yet then fully free, and although its fall is cushioned greatly by an antique seat for customers to wait on whilst their timepieces are being fixed on the fly, it is broken. Whilst Erica is asleep, this clock bounces off that comfy seat and smashes somewhat on the floor. The clock, however, didn't take kindly to the fall and goes completely haywire, spinning out of any kind of control, albeit backwards, even more so as if by magic. Much later Erica wakes up, and while still quite dark, she thinks it's late, like very late, but it's actually very early in the morning, around 7 o'clock the next one. So as Erica wakes up in the almost pitch darkness, she realises she has simply nodded off. Erica now goes over to the door to see out, and as she does so, she tramples over some smashed glass. "Oh darn it," she adds, while stepping on the broken timepiece glass. "Oh darn it" again, as she looks up at the wall before then switching the main store light on. Erica now adds in the bright light of the store, "What's this? This and this?" She points rather anxiously, whilst wagging her finger, as the shop has clearly changed. It's filled with everything, just like years ago. Erica goes over to the mirror to eye herself and see what's what, as she just can't believe her eyes. Erica is as she once was, in her 20s. She smiles, tufts her hair up, and laughs somewhat cheerily. She then wanders back to the clock with a brush and shovel, which she remembers as once having, and at that point she clears up the timepiece, which despite being broken badly, has a hand spinning backwards, rapidly, albeit that they are now gradually slowing as the battery runs progressively flatter. "It must take lots of power to do that," she then adds, just as the hands whir to a stop. "Well, okay, did," she now adds. The store now is as it once was, as the day lightens. Erica at this point opens the door and waits on customers, who appear in droves. Whenever Erica has a chance, she looks outside, as it's almost like another world, the one she remembers fondly, so very fondly, of years gone by. Now Erica sits behind her counter and cash desk with some fresh tea and thinks over everything that Benji, her wondrous great-grandson, had said late last afternoon, and remarks, albeit out aloud, "Yes, whilst time makes us wise through opportunity is cruel by decreasing the chance of said passage or finding truest meaning. However, at least my wisdom at any age remains untouched, as I have always felt this way. Erica now looks up at the door and prepares to serve the next customer as they pass through it. However, now, with a smile, the customer remarks, "Good morning, Erica, Miss Good." She, Erica, with a smile, simply replies with a broad smile back, "Good morning, Steve, Mr. Mann." And with that their eyes meet. Erica now sighs to herself rather contentedly. These years, these golden years are where. Erica yawns as she finally fully awakens and stretches her arms wide. Then adds, time I opened the shop. Erica now notices the till is ajar, yet filled with money from days gone by, which shocks her somewhat. She closes the till with a hand on her mouth in awe. Then as she walks over to the door, that timepiece that was on the wall has seemingly fallen and been swept up too. Strange that, strange. And as she passes a mirror on the wall, she's wearing clothes too from those days gone by. She hadn't noticed this before. And so she gives a twirl and then again and smiles, adding, "I have all the time in the world," and then laughs, adding again, "all the time in the world." The end. A Brian Fredworm McGregor production.